I am Jack Rammyz.
I'm jess-kitten.
And I'm Ranged Death.
And this is our first podcast. I wanted to, for a while, go over Toby Rogers' family life and situation, as jess-kitten and I have had extended conversations about their, what would you say, financial and environmental situations.
Socioeconomic situation.
There we go. So we've had a lot of deep conversations about this. I've also had deep conversations about the paranormal, the paranormal going-ons with Spectre General 66, which I'll go over in another episode. But for now, we're going to focus a lot more on the Rogers family. And Ticci Toby is written by Wade O'Donovan, castaway who has left our fandom. He left in June. But we have Ticci Toby in front of us here, and I've gone through and highlighted a lot of key points and things that really talk about the family and each character. Now, I want to start off with Connie Rogers is the mom, and the first line here I have highlighted has one thing for sure made her differ from those average mothers, and that was the dark bags under her eyes. Now, I'm confused about this sentence because it says one thing for sure that made her differ from other average mothers was dark circles around her eyes. Now, you two both have mothers. Aren't they usually, like, isn't that just a sign in general of, like, stress and things like that?
Yeah.
It was
stress,
just like,
not sleeping. Like, most people have circles.
Dealing with ridiculously crazy underage people.
So, that was just, like, a weird note that I noticed, that it just said average mothers and dark circles. The next thing I had highlighted was his pale, almost gray skin. That was more of a personal note, because I noticed a lot of people, when they talk about Toby on the Ask vlogs, or just, like, in general, when they try to represent him, they do give him, like, legit gray skin, which is usually described as pale skin. Now, have you guys ever seen anybody with, like, gray skin? Or
Nope.
described as gray skin?
Only, like, corpses on TV.
Okay.
That's as close to gray skin as I've ever seen in real life.
Gray skin, if you look it up, actually translates to very pale. So, like, yeah. Well, before I would train outside, but yes, me. Am I still really pale? The next one is this is gonna go more into the reason I have jess-kitten here. Jess, do you want to describe what you and I do?
Jack and I work at a school that teaches children who have developmental disabilities.
What are their age ranges?
5 to 21.
And do you want to briefly describe the environment in which we work, like the children?
A lot of them are behavioral, like they'll get aggressive, they'll injure themselves,
Like, what are, like, some of the, like, autism?
Yeah, autism.
Yeah.
Down syndrome. Oppositional defiant disorder.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Like, all of them have that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like, are they being teenagers or they actually have OD? It's kind of hard because teenagers are like that. And middle schoolers and just kids in general. So, with having that knowledge, Jess and me do work in the environment, and I want you listening out there to keep that in mind as we go through Toby. When we talk more about Toby later on with his Tourette's, and we're about to go into that now, that Jess and me do work in this environment with students and kids that, like, suffer from this stuff. Alright, so the next thing I have here is one of the many challenges he had to face growing up was growing up with rare disease that caused him to be completely numb towards pain. CIPA, or CIP, is a congenital insensitivity to pain, or... Ranged Death was supposed to turn off his cell phone. Or congenital, I'm going to spell this, or say this completely wrong, so you, the more professional one. Analgesia? Okay, well, CIPA. And because I'm super professional, I went on Wikipedia, because this is where I went to before, is described as one or more rare conditions in which a person cannot feel or and has never felt physical pain. The conditions described here are separate from, and then it goes on about other disorders like HSAN, which is more science and etiology. What else do I have here? It says this right here. I wanted to show you. You want to read that over? Or read that out?
Developmental disabilities such as autism can include varying degrees of pain and sensitivity as a sign. However, these disorders are characterized by dysfunction of the sensory system in general. This specific condition is not in itself an indicator of any of these conditions.
So, is what this paragraph saying it is not a sign of autism? Or it is?
It's not really.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit different. Like, with autism, it's usually more that their nerves are hypersensitized, so they'll feel more.
Okay.
Or they might feel less, like they might have a higher pain tolerance and stuff, whereas this is just, that can be in someone who has autism, just happens to have this too, or this can be in, like, average person. Okay. Neurotypical or otherwise.
When I bring this up and I ask about this because I have a versus question here about autism versus possession, because later on when the supernatural elements start coming into the story, it goes into his hand biting, and it's at a very specific point, and I marked that out on the story, and I wanted to see if we here with the information we have can make not a diagnosis because we're not like professionals, but kind of lean into, is Toby autistic? Or what actually what is he? Because the next thing goes into his Tourette's syndrome. Now, if my understanding is Tourette's is part of the autism spectrum at this point, because ADHD was added last year, ADD was added, there's a few things that were added. I think it's more of a spectrum now, right?
Well, it's always been a spectrum.
Okay. But it says...
You're supposed to turn off your phone, Jack.
It's on vibrate. Short time he attended grade school before he was moved to homeschooling, which we're going to get into later too, was his Tourette's syndrome, and it caused him to tick and twitch in ways he couldn't control. He would crack his neck uncontrollably and twitch every once in a while. So being in this environment, the ticks and the twitching, we see a lot of that. Can you describe any, without obviously giving names, like any specific things that you've seen? No?
HIPAA.
Oh, okay. Well, what I was saying is, like, have you seen things like what it's describing here?
Yeah.
Okay.
But not in this way.
So, different sorts of ticks and twitches. Because I've seen them. I've seen as well, like, different ticks and such. I mean, we've seen an array of how students will twitch.
But I think sometimes what you're seeing as a twitch is more stimming.
It's stimming. Okay, can you tell us the differences between stimming and ticks?
Stimming is something that individuals will do to stimulate some feeling that they like. Like if you see someone waving their hands, that's stimming, because it's just a feeling that they really like. And if you do it, it's actually kind of cool.
Yeah. So what we're doing is kind of just like shaking our hands like we just touched something hot. Yeah. Or trying to dry our fingernails or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's
Whereas
stimming.
A tick is something... It's like when you have a muscle spasm, kind of. You're just gonna...
Yeah, it's more involuntary.
Okay. So one is more voluntary, one is more involuntary. All right. So now we know that Toby has CIP and Tourette's. So it's 2. At this point, would you think Toby would be with individual with developmental disabilities? Like, would he need specialized education?
Not necessarily. He might.
But there's no information on.
Yeah, there's not enough information.
Okay. And I bring that up because I'm going to jump a little bit ahead. Throughout the story, it doesn't say anything about Toby's function. Like, is he low, medium, or high? It doesn't say anything else about it. I mean, he can talk. He's a little sassy later on, which I actually highlighted. So he, in my opinion, he is very high functioning. He doesn't seem to have any issues eating, bathroom, anything like that. So, that being said, the only thing we have here is Tourette's. And Tourette's come with multiple symptoms sometimes, right? Do you know off the top of your head any other things that Tourette's can come with?
Nope.
Okay. In my research when I first started with Ticci Toby, I actually researched a bunch into Tourette's. And I've seen hand biting was one of them. And tics, certain tics, like one girl would sit there and she would have to just go like, boo, boo, and make this noise with her mouth. And she said, this one comes and goes. There's ones that individuals had when they were younger that they grew out of. A lot of like eye twitches, a lot of the twitches that are described here, and swearing is a more popular one.
Or probably just any kind of loud vocalization.
Yeah.
Swearing, I think, would be more favored by younger people.
There's older ones too.
Well, yeah. But it'll start when they're younger because it gets them attention.
Oh.
And they'll realize, oh, hey, this happens when I feel this urge to vocalize, then I get that.
Okay.
And then sometimes it just kind of carries on, I think.
Their swearing in Tourette's is, there's a specific name for it. Because with Tourette's, then there's a whole bunch of categories of what kind of Tourette's you have. I've seen sexualized, I've seen swearing, I've seen involuntary muscle spasms, but there's a whole array. And I was wondering, based on that, like, if your kid has Tourette's, would they be in a special education program or something like that? And that's what we'll go into a little bit later on. But we've had a lot of discussion about the homeschooling aspect. Because here it says, it got so bad, he turned to homeschooling. Common learning, we're on page 2. Common learning environment with seemingly every kid poking or more like stabbing fun at him. Billy, range death. Have you ever had issues with bullying in school?
Hasn't everyone?
It's a good answer. What were your, do you want to share any experience or anything off the top of your head of how the administration handles bullying in your high school?
Not very well.
Not very well? You
get into a fight with someone, you'll get put into detention with the same person you got into a fight with.
Jess, do you have any experience with administration, how they handle bullying?
I don't know. The one major incident I ever had was handled okay.
Okay.
Like, the kid got suspended for a bit, and we weren't allowed to be in any of the same classes until, like, we couldn't be in any of the same classes from that point until we graduated high school, and it was an elementary school.
Wow.
So
that was handled pretty okay.
Yeah. He ended up getting expelled later, so it wasn't too much of an issue.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. In middle school, because later on it does describe middle schoolers, but in middle school I was bullied so bad, and I've said the story in Tumblr, and Jess and Billy know the story, but I was put into a closet. It was like, not like a closet, like a walk-in closet. It was such a small room, they could fit a small card table in and like 6 chairs, and I had to at one point crawl over the table to sit in a chair. And the way the administration dealt with me being harassed so much was removing me from several classes throughout my day and putting me in this closet with a teacher and like another student that was bullied. And actually, another person in 6 Seams went through the same thing in the same school. And yeah, so that's how they handled it with me. I mean, they did try to do, like, call the cops in for certain situations. Administration tried, but it never really stopped. So that being said, how do you guys think administration would have handled making fun of a child with developmental disabilities? Like,
they probably would have tried to put him in a class with other kids that have developmental disabilities. I know I had a small class of like 5 or 6 people at my high school that were similar to that. They would go to the occasional class, but for most instances, they were just in that one classroom, and that's where they got their education.
Same thing.
Huh?
It was the same thing.
Yeah, like we had a special ed program, and sometimes the kids would come out, like they would join like a history class with the people not in special ed, but for the most part they had their area, and then there was everyone else.
Yeah, I had that in throughout my schooling years too. We had our special education class. But I believe when Wade wrote this, he was still in high school. I believe he was in 9th or 10th grade. So he might not have as much exposure to the real world as we as adults have. So when writing this story, he might have not really thought that through, or whatever his decision was, that whether it was a plot-driven decision to, hey, we need Toby to be homeschooled to give him a sad story, or he got made fun of so bad that it was homeschooled. Like, he doesn't go more into detail about that. It's kind of like, you kind of need that detail there, because what the hell is going on in, like, Denver, Colorado, that this kid was tortured so much in school that he was homeschooled?
I think it's interesting because the way that he writes it is that it got so bad he turned to homeschooling. So it's like Toby decided he would be homeschooled, which if it doesn't really happen, like you don't decide you're getting homeschooled, because who's going to teach you?
Yeah.
Someone has to be there to teach you, and usually they make the decision to pull you out of school.
Which we're going to go into, we can actually go into now because it doesn't go much more into it. Again, Jess and I have had very in-depth conversations. I'm going to bring up Connie again. Connie, because later when we go into Frank, this is going to make much more sense. But we're going to leave Frank aside for now. Connie is the only other person home of age, because Lyra is probably, college age, which again we'll go into later. But Connie's the only person that would have been available to homeschool. And they do describe later on, like in the beginning of the story, they say Connie was driving Toby home from the hospital. Frank later on shows up at the house with his old car. Lyra crashed her car. So this family has 3 cars. Each person that is of driving age has 3 cars. When they describe the house...
how old is Toby at
Toby
this point?
is 17 at this point.
He's of driving age.
He is of driving age. So, actually we can go into that as well with the whole homeschooling thing. But the household supports people with 3 cars. The house itself is also described as an older neighborhood with quaint little houses all next to each other. Little blue house with white window panes. It's middle class, possibly neighborhood, like suburban-ish. I would imagine that if Connie had to homeschool Toby, she didn't have a job. So there's a lot of detail missing here.
Or she could have had like a 3rd shift job.
Okay. To our younger listeners, what does that mean?
Overnights.
Okay. So
could also explain the bags under the eyes.
There we go.
She doesn't sleep.
So, what have we discussed before about the homeschooling situation? Because I know we've gone into great detail about it.
Well, we'll assume Connie doesn't have another job other than homeschooling and taking care of Toby. So that family, when she made that decision to homeschool him, lost that source of income, whatever she may have been making. So they're now down to whatever Frank was making, and if Lyra had a job and was contributing to the family and not just making her own money for herself.
Now, for all you youngins at home who doesn't understand the financial strain of a family, when you have a house, you can either own the house, pay a mortgage, pay rent. Did I get all of them? Rent a house, pay the mortgage, or own. So we don't have information on that because, again, Wade did not provide that. So we don't know who the house is under the name. We do know that they own 3 cars and that they live in an older neighborhood.
Although the cars could have also been, like, much older.
Oh, that's
true. Because doesn't
true.
say it's Frank's old car.
It is. Oh, also, I want to make a quick footnote. The father's name is never mentioned in the story. We just named him Frank. And I forgot why we named him Frank. I think it was, like, the first name that popped into our head, like, last year.
I know, but with all the local commercials, I want to call him Dave. That's a real Dave move, Dave.
We'll just change his name every episode. He'll just be Larry at one point. So since we don't have the information if they owned, rented, or had a mortgage on the house, they have 3 cars. They have an older daughter and a son in high school in a quaint little neighborhood. If they have one person pulling in income, how much strain do you think that would put on Frank?
An incredible amount of strain.
Okay.
Like, he's supporting 4 people, 3 cars. If we can assume Frank's car is probably paid for because it's mentioned that it's his old car.
Yeah.
Or an old car. So chances are that's just his now. He owns it. But the other 2 probably had leases or loans out on them.
I'm gonna make a note here because we do have to go back to that because I just jumped way ahead on Frank. So what kind of training, what kind of sacrifices, including training, would Connie have to given up, leaving a full-time job, possibly full-time job, and going home to homeschool her developmental disabled son?
Well, she would have given up any kind of social aspect of her life that she would have gotten from her job.
Do you have anything, really?
Well, I was going more to the fact that we're kind of looking at it a little biased since where we live is one of the most expensive places to live. I just did a quick lookup of how expensive it would be to live around where Toby would live, and it's about 20 to 30% more expensive to live here than it would there.
Okay. So, do you think that one person could support a family like this?
One person probably couldn't support a family like this, but again, if we're saying maybe Connie had a night job, then she would be able to do it.
Okay. And what kind of strain? I mean, we talked about the bags under her eyes. Do you think that would have put a lot of stress on her?
We already said that.
Oh, we did? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We did that one.
And I'm going to bring that up because as we go, there's a lot of stars and highlights I put here because Connie throughout the story is either incredibly strong or horribly written. And we'll go back to that. So, Connie, I wanted to talk about the training that Connie would have had to go through. Or are you aware of any training? Because, interesting enough, I got asked not too long ago on Tumblr if someone asked if Toby might have spoken a second language. Right now, he's about 25 because he was 17 back in 2010. And I looked up and I asked around. Denver does not, Colorado does not require a second language. So, because I don't think Connie would have gone out there and gone off and been like, we're also going to teach you a second language on top of you being possibly developmental disabled. You're going to learn all this. But being high functioning, he has the capacity to.
Yeah, he probably had the capacity to, but it would depend on what she knew.
Okay.
And given the fact that they're in Colorado, there's probably not many people that are speakers of other languages. So in that case, you would only teach someone a language if you were living near somewhere where people would be speaking another language.
Colorado's pretty mountainous and such, right? Yeah. And there's like... And they do say that Colorado does not require a second language in their public schools, which is nice.
Lucky.
Yeah, lucky. What'd you guys take?
Spanish.
I took Spanish, and then I dropped out of that and just took more music classes to get my diploma.
I took Spanish, so... Hola. ¿Cómo estás, biblioteca? So, okay, so the older neighborhood. All right, so now we're going to go into a more sadder subject. So we know at this point that Lyra got into a car crash. So as the next few highlights is his father who wasn't there. Why Toby goes, why is he here at the house? And he Connie goes, he's here because he wants to see you, which is bullcrap later on with his character and how his character is portrayed. Toby replies, couldn't have driven up to the hospital to see Lyra before she died. And the mom's response is, he was drunk that night, honey. He couldn't drive. So this entire exchange is kind of, what the hell? And I want, before I go on to the next page, I wanted to ask, and granted, we're not parents yet, but think of the most abusive parent you can possibly think of, and do you think they would go to the hospital? Do you think they would go to the hospital if their child was on their deathbed?
If they were able to, maybe.
Their child, yes.
Okay. Oh, this is Frank. It's Lyra. Yeah. What they're pretty much saying here is that Frank didn't go to the hospital when Lyra was dying from a horrible car accident. Toby also at this point, they don't say it, but it's implied because he comes home in hospital gowns and stuff, which again, I'll go into extent of injury. Huh?
He comes home in a hospital gown?
Yeah. It says it in the first page, on the first, one of the first lines is that his clothes are torn. Yeah. The clothes he had worn before were so shredded and bloodstained that they weren't wearable anymore. That's how bad the car crash was.
Hospitals they send you home in sweats.
Yeah, they said they sent him down in a hospital in scrubs. So some nurse just gave him scrubs.
Some nurse is walking around naked because she had to give Toby her scrubs.
Yeah, that's not how hospitals work. But again, we're going to give Wade a lot of, leeway here because he was, 14 when he wrote this.
Sorry, that was funny.
That is really funny. So, what I'm trying to get is, Billy, if your kid was dying in a hospital...
Yes, I would go, but I'm not a horrible parent.
It's funny, not funny, but later on, the only description of him being horrible is that they say that he's an alcoholic, and when they describe on page 3 his spout of violence, it says he became an alcoholic, and he grabbed Connie by the hair and shoved her to the floor at one point, and Lyra tried to break it up, and he pushed Lyra... and she hit her back on the corner of the kitchen counter, which, if you've ever gotten a sharp, blunt object to the back, or especially around the spine, it is the worst. So those are the only, spouts of... What?
The only thing I would have to say about that, though, one of the things about CIPA that Toby has, if you don't feel pain, a lot of times you can't, empathize... other people feeling pain.
That's actually empathy is really interesting because empathy would go into love and all that. You see up here I highlighted framed pictures of his family. That's all he has that's described in his room. He has pictures of his family in his room. What teenager has I had a few pictures in my room of my family, but most of it was Evanescence and My Chemical Romance posters.
And anime pictures.
Nope, that was until later in high school. I was 18 when the anime started coming out. No, man, I had Star Wars, I had Harry Potter, I had My Chemical Romance, Marilyn Manson, Slipknot,
I had sports stuff.
Yeah. What did you have in your room?
Anime stuff.
Yeah, okay, anime. So it's funny because, I wanted to bring that up because I was wait a minute, if he's just, not feeling... He loves his family because he has pictures in his room. But it doesn't describe posters or animals or anything else that this kid would have in his room. Just he had pictures of his family. So that's really interesting. And it says that he had it before his father became an alcoholic. And that's the entire character of Frank is just purely based on he is an alcoholic and an abusive. And Jess had said this about Clockwork before. You called it a revolving door. You want to explain what that means?
Sometimes if someone grows up with an abusive or an alcoholic parent, they will see that behavior their entire lives while they're growing up and very impressionable. So there's usually one of two paths. One is that they will never touch a drink in their life because they don't want to turn out just like their parent. Or two, they will become exactly like their parent because they think it's the way to deal with your problems.
And I have talked about this before. You can become an alcoholic. I have very much experience with this. And it is emotionally draining on the person. Like, you don't know which parent you're going to get. Are you going to get the happy parent, the tired parent, the scary parent, the abusive parent? And it is rough growing up, and you don't know where you're going to turn out. I don't drink as much, and that is a huge factor because of how I grew up. But it says he became an alcoholic, but it doesn't say why he became an alcoholic. And I was wondering if perhaps you think it might be related to Connie having to leave a possible full-time job to homeschool Toby, who is developmental disabilities, which kind of can have a lot of weight on a family.
Yeah, I know we talked about it before, about if Frank had lost his job. Because that kind of stress and then not being able to find one can help spur alcoholism in some people. So Jack and I have theorized that he may have lost his job and that's why he became an alcoholic.
Inspector General 66, when we first went through this, had another theory. Because when we were talking about bloodlines, which we'll get into in another episode, that he started drinking again because we have theorized that Frank was a proxy or a future proxy, because we explained it through a bloodline, kind of similar to how Tribe 12 has their order of the administrator. So one of Inspector General 66's theories is that he became an alcoholic because he started seeing shit again. Or sorry, we're going to bleep that out. Started seeing things again. And I gave you guys the warning at the beginning, and I'm the one that swore.
Yeah, language.
Yep.
Language.
Come on, Jack.
Oh, I'm trying.
What are you doing?
I don't know. All right, so what are your thoughts on, going back now, what are your thoughts on Frank's character so far? That he didn't show up, he just became an alcoholic, didn't show up to the hospital and all that. Either. Go ahead. What's the matter, Billy?
I got nothing.
You got nothing? I mean, do you think it's poorly written, or do you think it's written to be that? Like, do you think maybe it's...
It could go either way. He could either just be really badly written and not to fault Castaway, but just being too young to know and think about, if this was my kid, and even if I was drunk, I would find a way to the hospital.
Yeah.
Or it could just be, he was drunk. He didn't care.
I often wonder if it's like shock factor, which is a lot of times the key point in creepypasta stories, is that, hey, I want this to be sad and stuff. Edgy. So yeah, and edgy. So this is my abusive dad, and my sister, or if you're a female creepypasta, got sexually assaulted, because that tends to be what happens in a lot of creepypasta face character stories, where the mom is abused, the father is an alcoholic and abusive, and the daughter is often sexually abused, and by either the father or the son, or yeah. So it's all these like edgy things that happen. Luckily there isn't any accounts of sexual assault in this story. Just this oddly alcoholic father that is also abusive for dubious reasons, or various reasons.
Yeah.
Now it says here, and I'm on page 3, I expected a hug from his wife, but she walked past him and put an arm around, she like grabbed Toby's shoulders and like moved him along. Like, has these instances of overprotection around Frank, and I'm gonna guess that's due to his potentially abusive behavior. But this is the part on Frank's character that I love, is that his daughter just died in the hospital, and he's first words in the entire story, his first actions in the entire story is him opening up his arms to hug his wife and going, "What? No welcome home hug, huh?" This is what I'm talking about with, like, the bad writing. Like, that's their first, like, not like, "Oh my god, Connie, Lyra's dead." Like, I'm gonna go into this. Like, when you lose a loved one, someone in your immediate family, you are just as dead as the person you just buried.
Or you feel as dead.
You feel, yes, you literally emotionally. Like, when my father passed away, thank God for all of my friends, because I couldn't even eat for 3 weeks. Like, people had to feed me. People had to sleep in the bed with me to make sure I was sleeping. My stepmother had friends that came up from Florida that spent the night with her for almost 2 weeks. My sister was the same way. Like, we had people in the house because we had instantly, my father died very suddenly, and he was, like, a huge pillar in our family, and he was, like, when he died, it was horrific. Like, I never lost someone like that, and it affects everybody. It doesn't matter. It's your immediate family. Like, they made Frank have nothing. There's nothing there. So I thought that was really interesting that they didn't do anything. However, he does later on go into Toby reacting to the death exactly how I felt when my father died, where it was just screaming in the pillow and not sleeping, and all you can think of is the, like in Toby's case, the car crash. All I could think of is, what was the last words I said, and what, how could this be? Like, it's not real. It can't be real. This person was just here. But it's like, why didn't Frank feel anything? But yeah, the only reason I have the next two lines highlighted was because I just wrote Sassmaster, and I'm going to add that into Toby's, like, obviously high functioning brain. Is like he made this comment. Frank says he's 16, he can walk by himself. Connie interrupts and says, no, he's 17. And Connie's like pushing him, like, Toby, why don't you get some rest today? I'll come get you when dinner's ready. He goes, no, I'm 16. I can walk by myself. He's 17. He was making a joke at his dad. But this right here, I should have highlighted. Do you see Connie's dismissal of Lyra's death now? But I don't know.
Not necessarily.
That's what I wanted to hear. Do you think it's a mask for Toby?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a bunch of those highlighted throughout the story where you get these interesting little things. Because Wade is such an interesting writer, because it goes from, like, oh my god, the grammatical errors and the errors of plot holes and on character flaws, but it also has these, like, little instances of, was he actually this smart to put in these supportive things for Connie? So yeah, we went over the framed pictures and his abuse, but also it says, Toby asks, like, why is he here? On the last page, he's asking, like, why is he here? And Connie goes, he's here because he's your father. So there's a lot throughout the story where it has these things of, is he divorced? Are they divorced? Like, they keep asking, why is he here? And Connie goes, he's here because he's your father. And also, like, Toby later on goes, it's like, yeah, page 4. He's like, oh, when is he going to leave? He's staying as far as I know. So I don't know if Frank lives with them or not. So again, that brings back to the economic situation of their family. Like, how is Connie running this household? That she has to homeschool Toby. There's a possibility of divorce, they never say.
But
and they're separated.
Just from Connie saying she doesn't know how long he's staying. And, like, that says Frank doesn't live there.
Yeah.
So they're separated, or divorced, or something.
And that means, like, I hope that they own the house. Because poor Connie. And again, this whole, like, is it dismissive or is it really good writing? Or Connie above that says, I know it's hard, Toby. Trust me, I understand, but I promise you it will get better. Again, like, Connie is either, like, the most incredibly strong mother because she has left her job to take care of her developmentally disabled son, and also is putting this incredibly strong mask on for her son. So you think they have a good relationship at this point?
I would assume so. Like,
it doesn't mention that she's cried at all. Like, the only time it mentions that she's down about Lyra's death is in the beginning. But I'm wondering if that's because she's not actually looking back and facing Toby. She's just driving. And it's going through her mind. What do you think?
It's possible she could be doing what I remember you doing after a while and just not crying or saying anything about it in front of anyone, and just kind of, when you're alone, you would do it. So that's where I think Connie kind of is. She's like, okay, well, I have to be strong for everyone else, and then I get out my emotions when no one's around.
So there's like, there's a deleted scene in here where Connie's just like bawling in the bathroom. I gotta pray that Frank is not as heartless and that he's doing that too. Because I wanted to do a rewrite of the story at one point. And the only like edit the biggest edit I would make is writing Frank better. That he lost his job, or if we possibly go with the paranormal things that he drank because he started seeing stuff, but kind of wanted to not talk about it. But again, I'll go in that later.
Like the death could also make him drink more.
There you go. That's another reason that the alcoholism could be like anything at this point. The death, the loss of job, and the possible paranormal element.
Loss of job, drink more. Loss of family member, drink more.
Pretty much. On page 4, it has I have this thing as this first incident of Toby first seeing Slenderman, and he pretty much blacks out, and he wakes up the next morning, goes downstairs, and it says, Connie goes, "Well, good morning, sleepyhead. You've been sleeping forever." And it's got that like 50s feel, because it's described as like Frank is sitting there like eating breakfast, watching like this small TV on the counter, and Connie's sitting there like making breakfast. Like, it is a very childhood interpretation of what a family would kind of be in that situation. Again, that whole like Connie is, what do you think that's a strong move again? Like, she's still doing that thing? Because as it goes on, it just keeps doing that. And she just keeps like, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay.
At this point, I'm going to say bad writing.
Okay.
Like, no matter how strong you're being, you're not going to be able to be like, oh, it's time to get up. You've been sleeping forever. Here, let me make your breakfast.
Yeah.
There's a point where you're going to break and be like, make your own damn breakfast.
I think at that point would have been like a good point for Wade to have written in, like, because it kind of does it, but it would have been nice if she was the one that broke down rather than an outside source being the one thing that affected her breaking down. Because page 5, it says, happy to worried as her son resisted responding to her. So she doesn't even go to sad. She goes to worrying about Toby, and Lyra is like the farthest thing from her mind. And then it goes into this thing of like Toby kind of just blanks out, and he reaches out to his father's arm for no apparent reason, like, and his father just smacks him and says, "Don't touch me, boy." So that might be another instance of being possessed, or just Toby doing something weird. I don't understand that part at all. I just highlighted that because I'm like, what the hell is going on there?
I don't know.
Yeah. So we gotta say goodbye. Bye!
Bye! I like that we waved.
Yeah, we did wave.